It's July 20th, 2023. I watched Cuomo E143 in catalog number. Um, I also, the other day, they had a very interesting they broadcast um, on Me TV, METV, uh, at EO. Um, they broadcast a whole series of things, starting with Jetsons. Then it went into a whole bunch of other, and I taped some of them, and then I was looking very and examining very closely the titles because they were all went from when before I arrived, and then um, thereafter in my childhood when I was too young to like really get a full sense, and then they were like they were not sequenced um, pieces in some form of or fashioned in some order to explain some storyline. Um, so there's this one episode where the Brady bunch, first of all, the Brady bunch they put on before I arrived, and then Brady became important during for that I've discovered anyway. They had it on that explanation of American presidents during my life frame, which was during Reagan administration, for whatever that means. For me, it's significant because that's the physical fitness test and the president that knew where I was and that I was alive, um, while knowing that I was at the Glen. Um, so I know the U.S. presidents with seal knew where I was in on these lands, and whatever went on during the time that I was there. Um, so I'm listening to Cuomo. I heard him and O'Reilly, the Life O'Reilly, banter back and forth. I'm trying to follow the conversation, but I'm so disconnected from that way of living, and I don't quite understand. Like I'm under the JU and the JU leadership, but I was born at astrological and astronomical Ptolemy as Su per SU and then space PER and then space natural. I think when humans, the way that they've learned it in these lands, under the JU and under the just ice, JUST, and then ICE, again, they call it justice, but it's at the moment, it's not a perfect system being fair because I see what Kamala Harris is vice president to Biden, so it's not a fair and perfect system. Um, so that's problematic. Um, and then watching the headlines, like they just put up this thing of this railroad, whatever, and chemicals going out into the air, and they use East Palestine and the toxicity. And then they use the word, which again, toxic has the Roman numeral 11 in it. Then they use dioxins, which has the word God in Spanish, which is DIO, and the number 11 for Roman numerals in it. And again, there's a man that uses the Roman numeral 11 with a sound to pronounce who he is. And I'm trying to calculate out how much interference is here. Then they have something called a Nikkie and a serial killer by the name of Rex on the front face of the headlines right now. And I'm just noticing just how much East Palestine toxicity and dioxins are somehow really injected into the American system or lack of culture at this point. Um, trying to figure out where the fee fi fo fum at Giants are, and knowing that Jack has a beanstalk and a golden goose. I heard the folklore when I was younger growing up. And then on this Brady bunch, which is a mother and a father. The father has three sons, the mother has three daughters, and then somehow they magically become this new blended family. Right before I arrived, that was the announcement. Don't know why, um, but I don't know if that settled old prospecting disputes in resetting the machine. Um, And then this girl, Nikki, in the headlines, she just had a new baby. So at one level, I'm like, oh, is that another reset in the cog in the machine? I hope, headlines wise. Maybe they'll be whatever. So, anyhow, um, so I'm just listening. So they go to this Grand Canyon. It's called Grand Canyon or Bust. And then they, they, they meet a man, but then all of a sudden this man becomes a prospector and then takes off with their car, their RV, and leaves them in this old western town with nothing, the whole family. And I'm like, and I'm just watching the threads on this piece of News Nation, which is some kind of outlet um, that I'm able to discover. Because I mean, there's things that go on like these hearings and think I have no idea where people even tune into these things. Something about an IRS. Again, they take stuff out of your paycheck, but I no idea how it actually works. Um, and that's when you can find work in these areas. So I'm just going to make note of what I've found.
Again, I don't care as much as many of you seem to about presidents' families and politicians' families. Everybody's family has trash and problems and drama. And I'm worried about me and my family and what the leaders do for me. Is there hypocrisy there? Yeah, if you want to see it that way, I get it. If you want to judge him for it and not vote for him, fine. But the idea that this is the basis of analysis in the election is not selfish enough. Next. Um, let's go to break.
Now here's the front story about this East Palestine, these toxins and this dioxin that was released into the air. Things I've never even heard of. Something about chlorine when it's burned. I mean, this is in the series of rooms I've been held within. These are not topics of conversation that were covered. How to even discover the level of chlorine in the air, in the breathable air, or the amount of toxins in the breathable air. They say it's covered by the EPA. I'm just learning about alphabet soup and trying to reconstruct it. Um,
It's been 6 months since East Palestine, the train derailment, and it's not over. That's why News Nation stays on it. All right. They have fear. They keep saying that things are toxic. Today they got results and they confirm the worst. Joining us now, News Nation investigative correspondent Rich McHugh, here to report that the land is toxic. But let's just get the numbers. Rich, what did they learn?
so they're saying the land is toxic in East Palestine. First I'm hearing of it.
Hey, Chris. So the results are the most staggering to date. Scott Smith, this independent testing expert, tested back in May, which was then 3 months. And he tested right around the derailment site where they burned these chemicals. The data is startling, and I got to read it. 27,000% more dioxins in the soil there than.
So now they're using two words I find very interesting when covering East Palestine. They're using the word dioxin, which has the word dio and then the 11 in it. And then they use the word toxin, also covering with the number Roman numeral 11.
than a control sample in a nearby town. The EPA, I asked them about this, they said they found also in the area right around the derailment site, they found the same dioxins 124 parts per trillion. He found them at 600,000 parts per trillion, obviously way more than they did. Residents there I've spoken to have been begging to have their soil in their homes, begging to have their soil tested. The EPA will not test them. They've told them they will not test their soil. They say you have to go ask Norfolk Southern. This is obviously a problem. The results are staggering, and it's time for people to have their homes and their lawns tested. And it's kind of a shame that this is not happening at this point.
You use the right word, Rich. Thank you very much. Shame. Shame on you, federal government, for making it happen this way. Shame on you if there's nothing to hide, that you're not owning it and doing the testing and being in front of it. Shame on you. Let's bring in East Palestine resident Jessica Conard and the man who conducted the independent soil testing, Scott Smith. Scott, so they come back and say he tested wrong, right in the site is the wrong way to do it, and it depends on what kind of test you do. What are the responses?
Well, thanks for having me, Chris. First of all, the EPA is on record accepting my testing results from the certified EPA lab, and my offer remains open with the EPA to test side by side. You can't find what you don't look for. That's why we're looking for it in the soil near the derailment site. It is that simple. And you know you can't go 6 inches beneath the soil like some of the EPA testing. You got to test the surface, and you got to understand where the contaminated dust is settled.
Where are you, Jessica, in the freak out factor of the government is not telling us things because they're worried about what comes next?
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly freaked out, but, you know, I'm appreciative of people like Scott that are coming in on their own dime. The truth is always going to come out. And while I'm appreciative of the investigation and, you know, the ongoing investigation, the ongoing testing, is it customary to do a criminal investigation before you treat the actual victims? And that's the problem, is that we are ignoring those core issues. We need medical testing, and, you know, Scott's results here prove that we are sick, that what we are experiencing is not a hoax. This is something that's real. We need indoor air home monitoring. And I think those are the big takeaways today, is that, you know, Norfolk Southern's really good at a PR campaign, really, really good at it. And, you know, the unfortunate truth is that it does take away from and distract from those core issues. So we need Biden to declare an emergency. And I have a team of people, and we're headed to Washington, D.C. next week to do just that.
Guess who will cover it? We will. Jessica, thank you. We're with you. Scott,
Thank
you
so much
for doing the testing and sharing it with us. We're going to take a break.
Great to be here.
Back in
Thanks.
3 minutes and 15 seconds.
Now I'm going to go to this Brady Bunch, which is a TV show, with this episode that they just aired. I don't know who's in charge of the TV monitoring or scheduling, but it just, especially for Me TV. So, but it's where I was able to just discover it for the first time. I had never seen this episode before. So it's Brady Bunch, which was Grand Canyon or Bust, Season 3, Episode 2. And the original air date was 9/23/1971. I recorded it on 7/16/2023. This is what it's felt like living in New York. Of course, it's a much more like in the scenery when I walk outside. It's more of a robust city because it's a metropolis and a urban epicenter for world commerce. But as far as being able to find opportunity and relationships that I can build over a lifetime, this is what it feels like.
I hope Mike gets back soon with help. When we started out for the Grand Canyon, who would have thought it would end like this? We all had so much much fun driving along. Our mistake was stopping in this ghost town and meeting that old prospector. He seemed harmless enough. Until he locked us in the jail because he thought we were going to steal his gold claim. Then he drove off in our car. We finally managed to break out of the jail, but we were still stranded without a car, food, or water. And that's when Mike and Peter left to try to get help. Oh, what if we're stranded here? Look, Alice, we're not doing any good just sitting around. Why don't we do something to try and get help? Like what? Well, look, you round up the kids and we'll all think of something.
And now I'm going to go back to the premise of what Brady Bunch actually is. They made a song, and I think it's a nationally known song for North America. I entered in 78, and it was a thing like that you could sing along to, and it kind of is one of those things where my memory is not the best, but this is one of the things that stick at Brady Bunch.
This is the BTV Network. Seen locally on WJOB Middletown and WZME Bridgeport.
Here's the story of a lovely lady who was bringing up three very lovely girls. All of them had hair of gold, like their mother, the youngest one in curls. It's the story of a man named Brady who was busy with three boys of his own. They were four men living all together, yet they were all alone. Till the one day when the lady met this fellow, and they knew that it was much more than a hunt. That this group must somehow form a family. That's the way we all became the Brady Bunch. The Brady Bunch. The Brady Bunch. That's the way we became the Brady Bunch.
Now, it says Reed. It says Henderson. These things are important in language for me. But more importantly, the only Brady I've ever found that was like of utmost importance was by astrology. And he played a sport with something called an NFL. He's no longer there, but he's the only significant quarterback I've ever heard of. And he also goes with the Americana of what this has been during my time frame here, again in a telemetry way and in a Ptolemy way at astronomy. He was incredibly significant. Plus, he wore the number 12. Now, again, with international relations and what I've been exposed to, it's more of some kind of toxic culture. Like tempers flaring at like really important things. Like they mention this girl, Nikkie. They mention this guy, Rex. I don't know if they're trying to put to bed something. I don't know if somebody tried to explain what the Americans' ability to find reputable husbandry in this modern age. It looks like escorting, perhaps, in somebody's mind or in somebody's dinner table conversation. Shouldn't have been that way. But that's, I mean, having to go on a website in order to find and get matched up is problematic. I've always thought very scary, not knowing who you're, like, is it a serial killer you're sitting across from? I mean, why is there no socially acceptable? Why are there no social clubs? Why is there no easy way to find career, employment, to find networks and groups? Why is everything now online and nothing is face-to-face or easily accessible? That's what I don't understand. But they put this man with the character of Rex. I don't know if that's to ease tensions with toxic and like dioxides. And then they have the woman, and now this woman is no longer as thin as she was, which goes into like a BIE conversation of bio, like energetic, whatever intolerance of what's going on here. But I'm listening to this story like in a parallel or a paradox, and I'm just like, and then they say that she has a new baby. So I don't know, is that for like cleaning the slate at headlines? I don't really know how the inner workings are working at this point. I've just been documenting it because I'm here. I just, again, don't know how to get out of this cycle that they've like forced me into. And I've got, like, again, the SU and the SU and the JU.
Contact with this suspect. What's the big question that we're all worried about right now? Did the accused in custody continue hunting women after the Gilgo Four, right? That's what investigators are digging in South Carolina. We finally have someone who can fill in that blank for us, okay?
And if while I was under the watch of the United States President office, since they gave the letter with the seal, knowing where I was growing up right before my season began, with trying, I mean, I was in an elementary school, I was in a middle school, I was in a high school. It would have taken an introduction to something respectable for my season to have gone correctly or properly or whatever, formally. But for some reason, it was withheld from that path, even though by telemetry and astrological programming within like the main construct of the matrix, it was known to some, whoever does planning and production and executive producing at the SU. But I'm trapped here amongst the JU. And some of the JU live very well, but my parents and I have not been one of those fortunate. Not quite sure why, especially being that I was going to carry this very special astrological child into the program or into the area, and it's been completely mishandled. Um, and then there's the part of the people who are guilty of producing this storyline that should have never have been produced this way. Then of course they're trying to protect themselves, but and then there's this thing they call defamation, which I'm not quite sure, but it's a whole lot of humans using a whole lot of words. But I just keep hearing the one storyline finally, whatever, in so I'm hearing it presented in multiple context, almost like this fighting of both sides, but still having to so it's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole Cattaruzza, it's Earth, solar system, Milky Way, universe, galaxies, broken all here, and they're using this.
Okay? She met the accused, Rex Huerman, in 20.
Oh, so my point is that if Rex being the other word for king, it's the one that I think King Charles III is using now. Because again, I met somebody from one of King George's men, which I don't know what that really means. I didn't know what it meant when he said it either, because I didn't know who that was. I had never heard of that particular, like, it was not on television, it was not spoken of in the schools. So I don't know if that one encounter then caused some derailment of toxicity. I don't know if somebody purposely did that because I was an American, or because my father has a straddle from the Americas to somewhere else, and whoever or however my mom was being treated through her whatever. I don't discount any of these things. I just don't know how to properly itemize them, quite frankly.
2015, remember the bodies were found 2010, investigation in earnest around 2011. 2015, this is. She was so creeped out on their date, she's been telling the story ever since. You'll hear from her directly, and I'm telling you, it's worth sticking around for. Then we have.
For me, I've never mentioned it ever. The people that I've met, I've never spoken about, not face to face, to anybody, not ever.
And we have breaking news in the Hunter Biden hearing. Is there proof that investigators had their hands tied when they were pursuing the president's son? Bill O'Reilly is here to weigh in whether Trump or Biden is in hotter water legally, and why all the water and weather on this planet is so hot right now, and what Bill O'Reilly thinks we can do about it. We also have a News Nation exclusive report. You know, you got to stick with stuff. People forget, we move on. East Palestine does not deserve that. It deserves our attention, the small town in Ohio that suffered that toxic train derailment back in February. So tonight, we have these independent test results. Now, there's a question right there. Why isn't the government testing on a regular basis and telling us what they find? Anyway, independent testing done that exposes dioxin levels, and we'll explain what those are and why they matter, that are thousands of times above the control levels, like what they're supposed to be, the safe range. Why isn't the government telling us this? And I want to hear from you. This is your show. 844-96.
I also see, since he's inviting me into that conversation, I also, in New York, can visually see particles, if we're talking like individualism, particles of alienations that are here. Don't know why, don't know on what invitation. I don't know how they arrived. I don't know under whose authority they arrived. I don't know how they're working that part. But they're everywhere. And it's not just one. If I'm speaking of like a culture of like on a petri dish of like microbiology, they call them colonies when there's a bacterial growth of some sort or an infection of some sort that then grows on the agar, and they all have different results. And again, it's part of the studies that I had. So I can see how, if I speak of it on that context of what's on the surface in New York, I can see these things. I know it's important to Homeland Security, but I don't know who any of them are. And I don't even know if those are clean lines of, because of this political effort to destroy the work culture where everybody is just working side by side, like as if they're one team, which is a problem for what I need and what I've been had going on in keeping clean lines so as not to interfere with the situation any more than it's already, because it's in some damaging whatever at the moment, the way it's performing. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole Cattaruzza. It's Earth, solar system, Milky Way, universe, galaxy is broken, and it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.